The rain came down in sheets that November night, turning the town square into a mirror of misery. Thomas Hayes stood under the broken streetlight, his expensive suit soaked through, ruined. In his arms, wrapped in a pink blanket that was no longer dry, his 3-week-old daughter made sounds that barely qualified as cries anymore. More like whimpers. Like she was giving up. He'd been walking for 4 hours. "Please," Thomas said, his voice cracking as he knocked on another door. This one belonged to Rachel Morrison, who ran the church nursery. She had 3 kids of her own. Surely she would help. "Please, my daughter needs milk. She's dying. Just nurse her once. I'll pay you anything." The porch light flicked on. Rachel's face appeared in the window, took one look at him and disappeared. The light went off. No answer. Thomas stumbled down the steps, nearly falling. His legs shook from exhaustion. When was the last time he'd eaten? Yesterday? The day before? Sophie made another weak sound against his chest, and he pulled her closer, trying to shield her from the rain with his body. "It's okay, baby girl," he whispered, though they both knew it wasn't. "Daddy's going to find help. I promise." He'd made that same promise at 14 other houses tonight. 14 rejections. The town of Millbrook knew Thomas Hayes. Everyone knew the billionaire who owned Hayes Construction, the company that employed half the town. They knew his reputation too. Cold, quick-tempered, impossible to work with. A man who fired people for small mistakes and never smiled at company events. They'd known his wife Catherine too. Sweet Catherine with her soft voice and gentle ways. She'd been Millbrook's darling, the girl everyone loved. When she got pregnant, the whole town celebrated. When she went into labor 3 weeks early, the celebration stopped. Complications, the doctors said. Hemorrhaging they couldn't control. Catherine had held Sophie for 10 minutes before the blood loss took her. She'd looked at Thomas with dying eyes and whispered, "Take care of our baby. Promise me." He'd promised. But how could he keep that promise when his daughter was starving and no one would help? Formula didn't work. Sophie's stomach couldn't handle it. 3 different brands, 3 different trips to the emergency room. The pediatrician had been blunt. "She needs breast milk, Mr. Hayes. Her system is too sensitive for anything else. You need to find a wet nurse." Find a wet nurse. As if it were 1850 and women lined up for such work. Thomas had tried milk banks. The nearest one was 3 states away, and their shipment wouldn't arrive for 5 days. Sophie didn't have 5 days. She'd lost weight, her skin had turned grayish, and her cries had gotten weaker every day. So Thomas had swallowed his pride and started knocking on doors. The town's response had been swift and brutal. "You think I'd put my mouth on a bottle for your baby?" Janet Peters had said, laughing in his face. "After how you treated my husband. You fired him for being 10 minutes late." "My milk is for my own child," Sandra Chin had said coldly. "Not for yours." "You never cared about anyone in this town," Margaret Foster had hissed through her door chain. "Why should we care about you now?" Thomas had tried to apologize, to explain that grief had made him harsh, that he was sorry for his past behavior. But sorry didn't open doors. Sorry didn't feed dying babies. Now he stood in the square, rain mixing with tears he didn't remember, starting to cry. Sophie had gone quiet in his arms. Too quiet. "No," he said, jostling her gently. "No, baby, stay with me. Stay with Daddy." Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. 3 weeks old and already giving up on life. Thomas looked around the empty square. Past midnight now. Every shop closed. Every house dark. Where else could he go? He tried everyone he could think of. Then he saw light. The Bluebird Diner on the corner of Main and 5th. Its neon sign flickered, and through the rain-streaked window, he could see movement inside. Thomas ran. His dress shoes slipped on wet pavement, but he caught himself, keeping Sophie secure against his chest. He hit the diner door with his shoulder, stumbling inside. Warmth hit him first, then the smell of coffee and pie. And there, wiping down tables in a faded blue uniform, was a woman he'd seen around town but never really noticed. She looked up, startled. "We're closed, I'm just..." Then she saw Sophie. The woman's eyes went wide. She dropped her rag and crossed the diner in 3 quick steps. "Is that a baby? Oh my God, is she breathing?" "Barely," Thomas gasped. Water dripped from his hair, his clothes, forming puddles on the checkered floor. "Please, I need help. She needs milk. Breast milk. Her stomach can't handle formula and no one will help us and she's dying and I don't know what else to do." He was rambling, he knew. But he couldn't stop. 3 weeks of fear and grief and desperation poured out in a flood of words. The woman stared at him and Thomas waited for another rejection. Waited for her to step back, to tell him to leave, to call him the same names others had called him tonight. Instead, she reached for Sophie. "Let me see her," she said quietly. Thomas hesitated. Some primal part of him didn't want to let go of his daughter, even for a second. But Sophie made that terrible weak sound again, and he carefully transferred her into the woman's arms. She pulled back the pink blanket. Her face went pale. "How long has she been like this?" she asked. 3 days, getting worse. 3 weeks since birth. And no one would feed her? Thomas shook his head, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. The woman looked at him, really looked at him. Her eyes were brown, deep and kind. She couldn't have been more than late 20s. Her name tag said Norah, in faded letters. "I can help," she said simply. "I'm still nursing. My milk hasn't dried up yet." Thomas felt his knees buckle. He grabbed the counter for support. "You will? You'll help her?" "Of course I will." Norah said it like it was obvious, like there was no other possible answer. "No baby should go hungry. Come on." She headed toward the back of the diner, then paused and looked back at him. "You coming? You look like you're about to fall over." Thomas followed her through the kitchen, past the industrial ovens and steel counters, to a small break room with a worn couch and a mini fridge. Norah sat down, already unbuttoning her uniform top with no trace of embarrassment or hesitation. "Turn around if you want," she said. "This won't take long." But Thomas couldn't move. He watched as Norah positioned Sophie as his daughter's mouth found what she needed, as she began to nurse with desperate urgency. The sound of Sophie drinking, actually drinking and swallowing, made Thomas's eyes blur with tears again. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Norah looked up at him, and something in her expression was so gentle it almost broke him. "Sit down before you fall down," she said. "There's coffee in the pot if you want it. When's the last time you ate?" "I don't remember." "There's turkey sandwich in the fridge. Eat it." It wasn't a suggestion. Thomas found himself obeying, pulling out the sandwich and eating mechanically. He didn't taste it. All his attention was on Sophie, watching her skin slowly regain color, watching her feed with the strength of a baby who wanted to live. 20 minutes later, Sophie fell asleep in Norah's arms, milk-drunk and finally peaceful. "She's beautiful," Norah said softly, stroking Sophie's cheek with one finger. "What's her name?" "Sophie Catherine Hayes." "And you're Thomas Hayes?" "I know. Everyone knows." Norah looked at him. "They talk about you at the diner. Say you're mean. Say you fired half the town at some point." Thomas flinched. I did. I was angry after Catherine died, and I took it out on people who didn't deserve it. I know that doesn't excuse it, but grief makes people do things they regret," Norah finished. "I understand that." She stood carefully, still holding Sophie, and handed her back to Thomas. "She'll need to eat again in about 3 hours. Maybe 4 if you're lucky." Thomas took his daughter, looking at her peaceful sleeping face. Then he looked at Norah. "What do I owe you? Name any price. Anything." "You don't owe me anything." "But I do. You saved my daughter's life. Please let me pay you, help you somehow." Norah shook her head, already buttoning her uniform. "I didn't do it for money, Mr. Hayes. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Because no baby should suffer when there's someone who can help. But she'll need to eat again in a few hours. And again after that. I can't keep showing up at your work. I can't." Thomas stopped, overwhelmed again. Norah studied him for a long moment. "Where do you live?" "The Hayes estate. North side of town. I get off work at 6 in the morning. I could come by after my shift. Feed her before I go home." "You'd do that?" "I said I would, didn't I?" Thomas felt something crack open in his chest. Something that had been frozen solid since Catherine died. "Thank you. I don't know how to thank you enough." "You just did." Norah grabbed her purse from a locker. "Come on. I'll walk you to your car." "I don't have my car." "I walked." Norah's eyes widened. "You walked through town for hours in the rain with a sick baby?" "I was desperate." "You're also soaking wet and probably hypothermic." "My car's out back. I'll drive you home." They went out the back door, Norah locking up behind them. Her car was an old sedan with rust spots and a cracked windshield, but it started on the first try. She drove carefully through the rain-slicked streets while Thomas sat in the passenger seat, holding Sophie, trying to process everything that had just happened. "Why did you help me?" he asked quietly. "Everyone else said no. Some of them slammed doors in my face. But you didn't even hesitate." Norah kept her eyes on the road. "I know what it's like to need help and have no one offer it. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Especially not a baby." There was a story there Thomas could tell. Pain in her voice that matched his own. They pulled up to the gates of his estate. Thomas gave her the code and she drove up the long driveway to the main house. Lights blazed in every window. The house looked beautiful and utterly empty. 6 in the morning, Norah said. I'll be here. Thank you, Norah. For everything. She smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. Take care of that baby, Mr. Hayes. Thomas watched her drive away, then carried Sophie inside. His daughter slept peacefully for the first time in days, her stomach full, her body warm. In the nursery, he changed her into clean, dry clothes and laid her in the crib Catherine had picked out before she died. Sophie didn't even stir. Thomas collapsed into the rocking chair beside the crib and wept. Not from despair this time, but from relief and something else. Something he couldn't quite name. The woman everyone in town ignored had saved his daughter's life without asking for anything in return. He would never forget that. And he would find a way to repay her kindness no matter what it took. Norah Williams drove home in the early morning darkness, her body exhausted but her mind spinning. She'd just nursed a billionaire's baby. The thought almost made her laugh. If someone had told her yesterday that Thomas Hayes would stumble into the Bluebird Diner begging for help, she would have thought they were crazy. But there he'd been. Soaking wet, desperate, holding a dying baby. And Norah hadn't thought twice about helping. That was her problem according to most of Millbrook. She helped too easily. Gave too freely. Never learned to protect herself first. Norah parked her rust-bucket sedan behind Harding's Hardware and climbed the rickety external stairs to her apartment above the store. One room. A kitchenette barely big enough for a hot plate and mini fridge. A bathroom with a shower that only worked if you jiggled the handle just right. Home. She unlocked the 3 deadbolts, another expense she couldn't afford but had installed anyway after her landlord forgot to fix the door last year, and stepped inside. The apartment was cold. The heater worked sporadically and this was one of its off days. Norah could see her breath as she flipped on the single overhead light. The bulb flickered twice before staying on. She needed to replace it soon. Add it to the list. Norah dropped her purse on the card table that served as both dining table and desk. 2 chairs, one with a wobbly leg. A futon against the wall that she'd bought at a yard sale for $20. A small TV she'd found on the curb, which worked if you didn't mind the green line across the screen. This was what 28 years of life had gotten her. She peeled off her diner uniform, now damp from standing in the rain with Thomas Hayes, and pulled on sweatpants and a faded college sweatshirt. The sweatshirt was from State University, where she'd studied architecture for 2 years before her parents died and the money ran out. Norah didn't like to think about that time. Didn't like remembering how close she'd come to graduating, to having a real career, to being someone. Instead, she'd become invisible. The girl who worked 3 jobs and still barely made rent. The girl who wore second-hand clothes and shopped at the discount grocery store at closing time for marked-down produce. The girl everyone in Millbrook looked past, through, around. Except when they wanted to mock her. Norah pulled a blanket around her shoulders and sat on the futon, too tired to sleep. Her breasts ached slightly. She'd stopped nursing her own baby 6 months ago, but her milk had never fully dried up. Some women were just built that way. The doctor said it was normal, that she could still lactate for years if she kept expressing milk regularly. Norah had kept up the habit, donating to a milk bank 2 towns over. The money wasn't much, but every little bit helped. Tonight, though, her milk had saved a life. She thought about little Sophie Hayes, about how light the baby had felt in her arms, how desperately she'd nursed. 3 weeks old and already fighting to survive. Norah knew that feeling. Fighting to survive. She'd been doing it since she was 19, since the car accident that killed both her parents on a rainy Tuesday night. They'd been coming home from her college orientation weekend, so proud that their daughter was the first in the family to attend university. The drunk driver who hit them head-on had walked away without a scratch. Norah's parents died on impact. She'd left school, used her tiny inheritance to bury them, and moved to Millbrook where her mother's distant cousin owned the hardware store. He'd offered her the apartment for cheap rent, and Norah had thought it was kindness. She'd learned quickly it wasn't. The cousin, Harold Harding, was a bitter man who resented having to help family. He raised her rent whenever he felt like it, forgot to make repairs, and complained loudly to anyone who would listen about his charity case tenant. The town had picked up his attitude. At the Bluebird Diner, customers often forgot to tip her. At her weekend job cleaning houses, the wealthy families left her awkward notes about taking care with their valuables, like she was planning to steal their silverware. At her 3rd job doing bookkeeping for small businesses, owners questioned her math even when she was right. Millbrook had decided Norah Williams was less than. And once a small town decided something, changing their minds was nearly impossible. But Norah kept going. Kept working. Kept hoping that maybe someday things would get better. She pulled out her phone and set an alarm for 5:30 a.m. That would give her time to shower and drive to the Hayes estate by 6. As she lay down on the futon, pulling the thin blanket up to her chin, Norah thought about Thomas Hayes's face when Sophie had started nursing. The relief. The gratitude. The desperation melting into hope. No one had ever looked at her like she was important before. Like she mattered. It was a dangerous feeling. Norah had learned not to get attached to moments like that. They never lasted. But still, as she drifted off to sleep, she couldn't help hoping that maybe, just this once, things might be different. The alarm went off after what felt like 10 minutes of sleep. Norah dragged herself upright, joints aching from the lumpy futon, and stumbled to the bathroom. The shower handle needed 3 jiggles this morning. The water came out lukewarm at best. Norah washed quickly, knowing the hot water wouldn't last long anyway. She dressed in her cleanest jeans and a green sweater with only one small hole near the hem. Her nicest outfit, really. She was going to a billionaire's house. She should at least try to look presentable. Norah grabbed a granola bar for breakfast and headed out. The November morning was still dark, frost coating her windshield. She scraped it off with a library card, the scraper having broken months ago, and started the drive to the north side of town. She'd never been to the Hayes estate. Never had reason to. But everyone knew where it was. The biggest property in Millbrook, sitting on 50 acres with gates and a guardhouse and gardens that required a full-time staff. The gate stood open when she arrived. Norah drove slowly up the winding driveway, taking in the perfectly manicured lawns even in late autumn, the fountain in the circular drive, the house itself. It was beautiful. All stone and large windows and architectural details that made her architect's heart ache with appreciation. Someone had designed this house with love and skill. Norah parked her beat-up sedan next to a sleek black SUV and felt immediately out of place. She walked to the front door, noting the craftsmanship of the woodwork, and rang the bell. Thomas Hayes opened the door before the chime faded. He looked terrible. Still wearing yesterday's clothes, now wrinkled and mostly dry. His hair stuck up in places. Dark circles under his eyes. But he was smiling. "You came?" he said like he doubted she would. "I said I would." Norah stepped inside when he gestured. "How's Sophie?" "Sleeping. She woke up twice in the night and I gave her the bottles of formula the doctor said to try if she got desperate, but she just threw them up. She's been crying for the last hour." As if on cue, a baby's wail echoed from upstairs. "I'll get her," Norah said. She followed Thomas up a grand staircase with an oak banister that probably cost more than her entire year's salary. Down a hallway with paintings on the walls. Into a nursery that looked like something from a magazine. Soft yellow walls. A white crib with delicate scrollwork. A rocking chair by the window. Shelves of books and toys. Everything perfect and beautiful and utterly heartbreaking because the woman who'd planned this room was gone. Sophie lay in the crib, her face red from crying, her little fists waving. Norah picked her up. "Hey, sweet girl. I'm here. You're okay now." Sophie's cries quieted to hiccups. She nuzzled against Norah's chest, already searching. "There's a chair," Thomas said, gesturing to the rocker. "And I brought water in case you needed it. And food. I didn't know what you liked, so I made toast and eggs, and there's fruit and—" "Mr. Hayes." Norah sat down in the rocking chair. "Breathe. I'm fine. Thank you for the water." She settled Sophie and let the baby nurse, watching as the tiny girl relaxed, her breathing evening out. Thomas stood nearby, watching with an expression Norah couldn't quite read. Longing maybe. Grief definitely. "You can sit," Norah said gently. "You look exhausted." He sank into a second chair near the crib. "I haven't really slept since Catherine died. Every time I close my eyes I see her. Or I wake up panicking that something's happened to Sophie." "How long were you married?" 5 years. We met in college, dated for 3 years before that. She was my whole world." Thomas rubbed his face. "I don't know how to do this without her. How to be a father alone. How to keep Sophie alive when I can barely keep myself together." Norah looked at Sophie, at this tiny person who'd lost her mother before she could even know her. "You're doing it right now. You walked through town in a storm to find help. You didn't give up even when everyone said no. That's what a good father does." "I wasn't always good. Catherine would be ashamed of how I treated people after she died. The anger, the firing people for nothing. I became someone she wouldn't recognize. Grief changes people. But it doesn't have to change them forever." Thomas looked at her. You sound like you know about grief. I lost my parents 9 years ago. Car accident. I was in my second year of college studying architecture. Norah surprised herself by sharing. She never talked about this. I had to leave school and I've been working odd jobs ever since. So yes, I know about grief. I know about loss. And I know that sometimes you do things when you're hurting that you regret later. But you still help me. Even knowing my reputation. Your reputation isn't my business. A hungry baby is. They sat in comfortable silence while Sophie finished nursing. The sky outside started to lighten, dawn creeping across the estate grounds. When Sophie fell asleep, Norah burped her gently and laid her back in the crib. The baby didn't even stir. She'll probably sleep for 3 or 4 hours now, Norah said. I should get going. When can you come back? I work at the diner from 2 to midnight. I could come by around 1? If that's not too late. That's perfect. Thank you, Norah. Truly. Thomas walked her downstairs. At the door he hesitated. I know you said I don't owe you, but I'd like to pay you for your time. And your milk. It's only fair. Norah started to refuse. Pride made her want to say no. She didn't need his money, she was fine on her own. But she wasn't fine. And maybe accepting help didn't make her weak. Maybe it made her smart. Okay, she said. Thank you. Thomas pulled out his wallet and handed her several $100 bills. Norah's eyes widened. That's too much. It's not nearly enough. Please, take it. Norah folded the bills carefully and put them in her pocket. More money than she made in 2 weeks at the diner. I'll see you at 1, she said. She drove home in the rising sun, her mind spinning again. In 24 hours, her entire life had shifted. She had a billionaire's baby depending on her. She had money in her pocket that would pay this month's rent and then some. She had purpose again. And that scared her almost as much as it gave her hope. 2 weeks passed in a rhythm that Norah had never experienced before. Every morning at 6, she drove to the Hayes estate and nursed Sophie. Every afternoon at 1, she came back after her diner shift. And twice more during the night when Thomas called, desperate because Sophie was crying and wouldn't settle. Norah didn't mind the late calls. She wasn't sleeping well anyway. What surprised her was how quickly the Hayes estate started to feel familiar. She knew which floorboards creaked in the upstairs hallway. She knew where Thomas kept the baby blankets, the diapers, the burp cloths. She knew that the kitchen had the most beautiful morning light and that the nursery faced east, perfect for watching sunrise. She also knew that Thomas Hayes was nothing like his reputation suggested. You're overthinking the formula situation, Norah said one morning, watching Thomas pace the kitchen while Sophie slept upstairs. She's gaining weight. She's healthy. The doctor said she's fine. But what happens when you're not available? What if you get sick or have to leave town or... Thomas stopped, running his hands through his hair. He did that when he was stressed. Norah had noticed. Then we'll figure something out. But that hasn't happened yet, so maybe stop worrying about problems that don't exist. Thomas looked at her, and something in his expression made Norah's breath catch. Gratitude, yes. But also something else. Something warmer. You're very sensible, he said. Someone has to be. You're currently wearing 2 different socks and your shirt's inside out. Thomas looked down at himself and laughed. Actually laughed. Norah realized she'd never heard him laugh before. It was a good sound. I got 3 hours of sleep last night. Sophie decided 2 a.m. was party time. I remember. I was here for the party. Norah had driven over at 2:30 when Thomas called, panicked because nothing would calm Sophie down. The baby had just wanted to be held and walked around. No amount of rational explanation convinced Thomas that was normal baby behavior. You should let me pay you more, Thomas said, not for the first time. You're here constantly. You've given up sleep, time, everything. You're already paying me plenty. And he was. Thomas had insisted on paying her $200 per feeding session. Norah had protested, but he'd countered that it was less than he'd pay a live-in nurse and Norah did twice the work. The money had changed Norah's life. She'd paid Harold 3 months of rent in advance, which had shocked him into silence. She'd bought groceries without checking prices first. She'd even bought herself new work shoes that didn't pinch her toes. But more than the money, Sophie had changed something in Norah. She felt needed again. Purposeful. Like she mattered. Have breakfast with me, Thomas said suddenly. I mean, you're already here and I made too much food anyway. It's wasteful to let it go to waste. Norah hesitated. Eating breakfast felt personal. More than just nursing a baby and leaving. But Thomas looked hopeful, and Norah found she didn't want to disappoint him. Okay, she said. Just this once. That's what she told herself. Just this once. But the next morning Thomas asked again. And the morning after that. By the end of the first week, having breakfast together had become routine. They talked about everything. About Catherine and how much Thomas missed her laugh. About Norah's parents and the architecture degree she'd never finished. About Sophie's tiny milestones, her first real smile, the way she gripped their fingers, how she seemed to recognize Norah's voice. "She thinks you're her mother," Thomas said one morning watching Norah feed Sophie. "I'm not. But you're the closest thing she has. Catherine would be grateful, I think. That Sophie has someone kind taking care of her." Norah didn't know what to say to that. She'd been careful not to get too attached. Sophie wasn't her baby. This arrangement was temporary. Eventually, Sophie would transition to formula or solid food, and Norah would go back to her regular life. But holding Sophie felt natural. Watching her grow felt right. And being in this house with Thomas felt like something Norah didn't want to examine too closely. On the 8th day, Thomas asked Norah to stay longer. "I have a conference call at 9, he explained. "And the nanny agency still hasn't found anyone suitable. Could you watch Sophie for a few hours? I'll pay you extra." Norah should have said no. She had to sleep sometime. But Thomas looked so tired, so stressed, and Sophie was sleeping peacefully after her feeding. "Okay," Norah said. "But I'm not taking extra money for babysitting." She spent the morning exploring the house with Sophie in her arms. The library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. The conservatory with windows overlooking the gardens. The sitting room with Catherine's piano, which Thomas said he couldn't bear to play anymore. Norah sat at the piano bench, holding Sophie carefully, and played a simple melody with one hand. Her mother had taught her. One of the few skills she'd kept up over the years. Sophie cooed, her eyes tracking Norah's fingers on the keys. "You like music?" Norah asked. "Your mama probably played for you when you were still in her belly." She picked a good piano. "This is a Steinway. Very expensive, very beautiful." She played another song, this one a lullaby her father used to sing. Sophie's eyes drifted closed. "You're good at that." Norah jumped, nearly dropping Sophie. Thomas stood in the doorway, his conference call apparently over. "Sorry," Norah said. "I shouldn't have touched the piano without asking." "No, please. It's nice to hear it played again. Catherine would want it used." Thomas crossed the room and sat beside her on the bench. "What else can you play?" "Just simple things. I'm not very good." It sounded good to me. They sat there, Sophie sleeping between them, and Norah played a few more songs. Thomas listened without speaking, and when she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You've given me so much," he said finally. "My daughter's life. Peace of mind. Music in this house again. I don't know how to repay that." "You don't have to repay kindness, Mr. Hayes." "Thomas. Please call me Thomas." He looked at her. "And you've been more than kind. You've been family. To both of us." The word hung in the air between them. Family. Norah didn't have family anymore. Hadn't for 9 years. The longing for it, the wanting, hit her so hard she had to look away. "I should go," she said, standing carefully with Sophie. "I need to sleep before my shift at the diner." Thomas took Sophie from her. His hands brushed Norah's and the contact felt electric. "Will you come to dinner tomorrow night?" he asked. "Nothing fancy. Just the 3 of us. I'm trying to cook more and I'd like the company." Sophie would too. Norah knew she should say no. This was getting too comfortable, too familiar. She was the hired help, essentially. Not family no matter what Thomas said. But she looked at Sophie, at this baby she'd helped save, and at Thomas, this grieving man who was trying so hard to be a good father. "Okay," she said. "What time?" 7? "I'll be here." And she was. With a homemade apple pie because showing up empty-handed felt wrong. Thomas had made spaghetti and meatballs. He'd clearly put effort into it, though the pasta was slightly overcooked and the sauce came from a jar. But the table was set nicely, with candles and real napkins, and Sophie sat in a bouncy seat nearby, watching them with wide eyes. "This is nice," Norah said and meant it. "It's probably terrible," Thomas admitted. "I'm not much of a cook. Catherine handled most meals, and after she died, I mostly ordered takeout or let the housekeeper make me things." "You have a housekeeper?" "Mrs. Chen comes 3 times a week. She's been on vacation visiting her daughter, but she'll be back next week." They ate and talked, and Thomas told Norah stories about Catherine. How they'd met at a college party, how she'd laughed at his terrible jokes, how she'd said yes to his proposal on a beach in Florida. "She would have liked you," Thomas said. "She always said the measure of a person was how they treated those who couldn't do anything for them. You helped Sophie when I had nothing to offer but desperation. Catherine would have respected that. I'm sure she was wonderful, Norah said softly. She was. But she's gone and Sophie and I are still here. We have to keep living. Thomas looked at Norah across the table. You've reminded me how to do that. How to find joy in small things. How to be grateful instead of angry. I haven't done anything special. You have. You just don't see it. They did dishes together after dinner, Thomas washing while Norah dried. It felt domestic. Comfortable. Like something Norah could get used to if she wasn't careful. When she left that night, Thomas walked her to her car. Thank you for coming, he said. For everything. You've made these past 2 weeks bearable. More than bearable. Good. Norah wanted to say something meaningful, something that captured how she felt. But the words wouldn't come. I'll see you tomorrow morning, she said instead. Driving home, Norah realized she was crying. Not from sadness. From something else. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. She'd spent 9 years invisible. 9 years working herself to exhaustion just to survive. 9 years believing she didn't matter. But Thomas Hayes saw her. Sophie needed her. And for the first time since her parents died, Norah Williams felt like she belonged somewhere. That feeling terrified her. Because she knew from experience that the moment you started to believe in happiness, it could be ripped away. The dinner invitations became regular. 2 nights a week, then 3, then every night that Norah didn't have to work late. She'd stopped questioning it. Stopped overthinking. Being at the Hayes estate felt more like home than her cramped apartment ever had. But Norah noticed things. Small details that worried her. Thomas's phone rang constantly with work calls that made his jaw tight. Papers covered his desk in the study, marked with angry red ink. And twice she'd heard him on the phone with someone, his voice sharp with frustration that reminded her of his old reputation. Everything okay? Norah asked one evening, finding him in his study after dinner. Sophie was asleep upstairs, and Mrs. Chin had insisted on cleaning the kitchen, leaving them with rare free time. Thomas looked up from a blueprint spread across his desk. He looked exhausted. The community center project is a disaster, he said bluntly. We're 3 months behind schedule, the design has structural problems, and the town council is threatening to pull funding. It was supposed to be my tribute to Catherine. She'd been advocating for a community center for years, and I promised her before she died that I'd build it. Now I can't even do that right. Norah moved closer, looking at the blueprint. Her architect's brain immediately started processing the layout, the measurements, the support structures. Can I see the full plans? She asked. Thomas pulled out a folder thick with documents. Norah spread them across the desk, studying each page carefully. 5 minutes in, she saw the problem. This load-bearing wall, she said, pointing to the main assembly area. It's supporting too much weight for the materials specified. The calculations are off. And here, the foundation isn't deep enough for the soil type. That's why you're having structural issues. Thomas stared at her. How do you know that? I studied architecture, remember? I specialized in structural design before I had to leave school. Norah pulled out a pencil from Thomas's desk organizer and started sketching on a blank sheet. If you reinforce here and add support columns in these locations, it would distribute the weight properly. And the foundation needs to be at least 18 inches deeper on the east side where the water table is higher. She kept sketching, losing herself in the problem solving. It felt good to use her brain this way again. To think about buildings and design instead of just orders and cleaning schedules. When she looked up, Thomas was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. What? Norah asked. You just solved a problem my entire engineering team has been fighting with for 6 weeks. Oh, I might be wrong. It's been years since I did this kind of work, and I'm sure your team knows better than. Norah. Thomas cut her off gently. You're not wrong. This is exactly what we needed. The question is, why are you working 3 jobs when you should be designing buildings? Because life doesn't always work out the way we plan. It could. It should. Thomas stood, gathering the plans. I want you to work on this project. Officially. As a consultant or whatever title you want. You can fix this, I know you can. Thomas, I can't. I'm not qualified. I don't have my degree. You have knowledge and skill. That's what qualifies you. Please, Norah. This project matters to me. Catherine matters to me. And I trust you. The words hit Norah hard. Trust. How long had it been since someone trusted her with something important? I'd have to quit my jobs, she said slowly. I can't work on a major construction project and pull night shifts at the diner. Then quit. I'll pay you what you're making at all 3 jobs combined. More if you want. Name your price. Norah's mind spun. This was crazy. She couldn't just walk away from stable employment for a temporary consulting gig, could she? But she looked at the blueprints, at the problems she could see and solve, and felt that old excitement kindle in her chest. The excitement she'd felt in college when a professor praised her design. The joy of creating something permanent and beautiful. "Let me think about it," she said. "Of course. Take your time." But that night, lying on her lumpy futon, Norah couldn't sleep. Her mind kept returning to those blueprints, to Thomas's offer, to the possibility of doing real architecture work again. By morning she'd made her decision. She gave notice at the diner, at her cleaning job, at the bookkeeping gig. Her bosses were surprised but not upset. Norah was good at her work, but good workers were replaceable. That was the truth of low-wage jobs. 1 week later, Norah Williams officially became a consultant for Hayes Construction. Thomas set her up in the estate's study, which had better light than his office at the construction site. He brought her coffee every morning, checked on her progress every afternoon, and asked intelligent questions that showed he actually understood the work she was doing. Working with Thomas was different than Norah expected. He was demanding but fair. He pushed her to explain her choices but accepted her expertise when she proved herself right. And when she made mistakes, he helped her fix them rather than berating her. "You're good at this," she told him one afternoon, after he'd caught an error in her calculations before it became a problem. "Managing people, I mean. I heard you were terrible at it." Thomas winced. "I was. After Catherine died, I was so angry at the world that I took it out on anyone nearby. People were afraid of me. I fired good workers over nothing. I was a horrible boss and a worse person." "What changed?" "You did. Sophie did." Thomas set down the plans he'd been reviewing. "Seeing you work so hard for what you have, never complaining, always kind to everyone. Watching Sophie grow and knowing Catherine would want me to be a better man for her. I can't undo the past, but I can do better moving forward." "People can change," Norah said. "If they want to. Do you think Millbrook will believe I've changed?" "I don't know. Small towns have long memories." She wasn't wrong. When word got out that Thomas Hayes had hired Norah Williams as a project consultant, the town's reaction was swift and ugly. At the grocery store, women whispered behind their hands. At the gas station, the attendant made a crude joke about Norah moving up in the world on her back. Even Harold, her landlord, cornered her outside the hardware store. "Heard you're working for Hayes now," he said, his tone suggesting something distasteful. "Living at his place too, from what folks say." "I'm consulting on his construction project," Norah said evenly. "And I still live above your store, Harold. You know that since you cash my rent checks. For now. But I suspect you'll be moving to fancier accommodations soon enough." He smirked. "Just remember where you came from, girl. Remember who helped you when you had nothing." Norah bit back a sharp reply. Harold had done the bare minimum, and only because they were distantly related. But arguing wouldn't help. She walked away, feeling the weight of the town's judgment on her shoulders. That evening, Thomas found her in the study, staring at blueprints but clearly not seeing them. "What's wrong?" he asked. "People are talking. About us. About me working for you and spending time at your house. They're saying ugly things." Thomas's expression darkened. "What kind of things?" "It doesn't matter." "It does matter. Tell me." So Norah told him. About the whispers and the jokes. About Harold's insinuations. About how the town seemed to think she was some kind of opportunist taking advantage of a grieving widower. "They're wrong," Thomas said firmly. "You've earned every penny I pay you. Your designs are saving this project. Anyone who says otherwise is jealous or ignorant. But they'll keep talking. It might affect your business, your reputation. Let them talk. My reputation was already terrible. Yours is the one that matters, and anyone who actually knows you knows the truth." Thomas moved closer. "Don't let them make you feel small, Norah. You're brilliant and talented, and you deserve to be recognized for it." His words warmed something in Norah's chest, made her stand a little taller. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me for stating facts." Thomas smiled. "Now show me what you've been working on. I want to see these new support column placements." They worked until late, until Sophie woke crying upstairs and Norah went to nurse her. When she came back down, Thomas had made tea and was reviewing her latest sketches. "These are perfect," he said. "We can present them to the council next week. They're going to be impressed." "I hope so. They will be. Trust me." And somehow Norah did trust him. Completely. That realization should have scared her. Instead, it felt like coming home. The council presentation was scheduled for Thursday at 7 p.m. Norah spent the week perfecting her designs, triple-checking every calculation, preparing responses to every possible question. Thomas helped, playing devil's advocate and asking tough questions that forced Norah to defend her choices. By Thursday afternoon, Norah was ready. Or as ready as she'd ever be. "You're going to do great," Thomas said, straightening his tie in the hallway mirror. He'd insisted they both dress professionally for the presentation. Norah wore a blue blazer she'd bought at a consignment shop and the nicest pants she owned. Thomas wore a sharp gray suit that probably cost more than her car. "What if they hate it?" Norah asked. "They won't. But even if they do, we know it's good work. That's what matters." They drove to town hall together, Sophie safely with Mrs. Chen for the evening. The council chambers were already filling up when they arrived. Norah recognized faces from around town. Shop owners, business leaders, the mayor. And sitting in the front row was a group of women Norah knew by reputation. The Millbrook Ladies Auxiliary. Wealthy, influential, and known for making or breaking reputations in town. Their leader, Patricia Morrison, gave Norah a look that could freeze water. "This should be interesting," Thomas muttered, seeing the same thing Norah did. The meeting started promptly at 7. Mayor Henderson called it to order, reviewed the community center project's troubled history, and then invited Thomas to present the updated plans. Thomas stood, commanding the room instantly. "Thank you, Mayor. As you know, this project has faced setbacks. But I'm pleased to introduce our consultant, Norah Williams, who has redesigned the structural elements and put us back on track." "Norah?" Norah stood on shaking legs and moved to the front of the room. She'd brought poster boards with her designs, which Thomas helped her set up on easels. "Good evening," she began. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. The original community center design had several structural flaws that caused delays and safety concerns. I've identified these issues and proposed solutions that maintain the original vision while ensuring long-term stability. She walked them through each problem and fix, using simple language to explain complex engineering concepts. The council members nodded, taking notes. Mayor Henderson asked intelligent questions that Norah answered confidently. It was going well. Then Patricia Morrison stood up. "I have a question," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "What exactly qualifies you, Miss Williams, to redesign a multi-million-dollar project?" Norah took a breath. "I studied architecture at State University, specializing in structural design. While I didn't complete my degree, I've maintained my knowledge through independent study and—" "So you have no degree, no certification, no professional experience?" Patricia cut her off. "Yet Mr. Hayes has entrusted you with fixing his late wife's memorial project. How fascinating." The room went quiet. "My qualifications are solid," Norah said evenly. "The designs speak for themselves." "Do they? Or are they simply pretty pictures from someone playing architect?" Patricia smiled coldly. "We all know why you're really here, dear. The whole town knows." "Patricia, that's enough," Mayor Henderson said sharply. "Is it? We're about to approve public funding for a project designed by an unqualified consultant whose only credential is living at Mr. Hayes's house and nursing his baby. I think the taxpayers deserve to know what they're paying for." Murmurs spread through the room. Norah felt her face burn with humiliation. Thomas stood, his voice tight with anger. "Miss Williams is completely qualified. Her designs have been reviewed by licensed engineers who confirmed their soundness. And her personal life is none of this council's business." "But it is our business when it affects a public project," another woman chimed in. Deborah Chin, no relation to Mrs. Chin, known for her sharp tongue. "You've had several consultants on this project, Mr. Hayes. All qualified professionals. Yet you hired someone with no degree and no experience. One has to wonder why." "Because she's better than all of them combined," Thomas shot back. "Or because she's convenient," Patricia said. "Living under your roof. Caring for your child. Really, Mr. Hayes, we're not blind. The girl saw an opportunity and took it. Can't blame her, I suppose. But let's not pretend this is about qualifications." Norah stood frozen. This was worse than whispers. This was public humiliation, accusations made in front of the entire town leadership. "That's a lie," she managed to say. "I earned this position through my work." "Did you? Then perhaps you can explain why you're living at the Hayes estate. Surely a consultant can afford her own place, especially with Mr. Hayes's generous payments." "I'm not living there. I have an apartment above Harding's Hardware. But you're there every day. All day and night from what I hear. Rather cozy for a professional relationship." "I'm nursing his daughter," Norah said, her voice breaking. "She can't tolerate formula. I'm feeding her because no one else would help." "How noble." And convenient. Patricia's smile was vicious. You've certainly made yourself indispensable, haven't you? First the baby, now the project. One wonders what's next. Enough, Mayor Henderson banged his gavel. This is inappropriate, Patricia. Miss Williams is here to present architectural designs, not defend her character. Her character is relevant when public money is involved. No, it's not. Thomas's voice cut through the room like ice. What's relevant is that these designs are excellent. That they solve every problem the project faced. And that Norah Williams is one of the most talented architects I've ever worked with, degree or no degree. You're biased, Deborah said. Obviously. I'm honest. Which is more than I can say for this council. Thomas gathered the poster boards. We're done here. When you're ready to approve quality work instead of engaging in character assassination, contact my office. He grabbed Norah's hand and pulled her toward the door. Running away won't change the truth, Patricia called after them. The whole town sees what's happening, Mr. Hayes. You can't protect her from that. They made it to Thomas's car before Norah started crying. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I ruined everything. The project, your reputation, everything. You didn't ruin anything. They did. Thomas pulled her into his arms, holding her while she cried. Those women are jealous, bitter people who can't stand seeing someone succeed without their approval. Nothing you did deserved that treatment. But they're right. I'm not qualified. I don't have a degree. I'm living at your house most days. They're not wrong. They're completely wrong. You are qualified. You earned your position. And what you do with your time is your business, not theirs. Norah pulled back, wiping her eyes. The council won't approve the project now. Not with me involved. Then I'll find private funding. I don't need the council's money. Thomas, you can't. This was supposed to be Catherine's legacy. You can't let them ruin it because of me. They're not ruining it. And it's my decision. Thomas cupped her face gently. You matter more than their approval, Norah. Don't you see that? She wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe she mattered, that her work was good, that she belonged in this world. But Patricia's words echoed in her head. The whole town sees what's happening. Maybe they did. Maybe Norah had been fooling herself, thinking she could escape her place in Millbrook's hierarchy. Take me home, she said quietly. Please. Thomas drove her to the hardware store. At her door he hesitated. Don't let them win, he said. Don't let them make you small. I'll see you tomorrow, Norah said, not promising anything. She climbed the stairs to her cold apartment and cried herself to sleep on her lumpy futon. For the first time in weeks she felt invisible again. And this time she wasn't sure she wanted to be seen. Norah didn't go to the Hayes estate the next morning. For the first time in 3 weeks she sent a text instead. I can pump milk and drop it off. You don't need me to come inside. Thomas's response was immediate. Norah, please. We need to talk. I can't. I'm sorry. She turned off her phone and spent the day in her apartment, trying not to think about Sophie's feeding schedule or Thomas's worried expression or the humiliation of last night's council meeting. By afternoon there was pounding on her door. Norah opened it to find Thomas Hayes standing in the narrow hallway, looking furious and desperate in equal measure. You can't hide from me, he said. And you can't punish Sophie because you're upset. Guilt stabbed through Norah's chest. I sent milk. I'm not punishing anyone. Bottled milk isn't the same and you know it. Sophie's been crying all morning. She needs you. She needs food. I'm providing it. She needs you, Norah. And so do I. Thomas pushed past her into the tiny apartment. He looked around at the single room, the futon, the cold radiator. You live here? This is where you've been staying when you're not at my house. It's all I can afford. It's not fit for anyone. Thomas turned to her. Come home. Please. That's not my home. It could be. Thomas ran his hands through his hair, that stressed gesture Norah knew well. I've been thinking all night. About what Patricia said, about the town's perception, about everything. And I have a solution. There's no solution. They'll never accept me. Then stop trying to get their acceptance. Come work for me full-time. Not as a consultant. As my head of architectural design. With a real salary, benefits, everything. Move into the estate properly. There's a whole wing that's empty. You'd have privacy, space, safety. Norah stared at him. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. The community center project needs you. My company needs you. Sophie needs you. Thomas moved closer. And I need you, Norah. These past weeks, having you in my life, in my home, it's made everything better. For the first time since Catherine died, I feel like I can breathe again. Thomas? I know it's fast. I know people will talk more than they already are. But I don't care. I want you in my life permanently. As my architect, as Sophie's caregiver, as... He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. As family. Real family. Norah's heart pounded. This was everything she'd secretly wanted and everything that terrified her. What about your reputation? She asked. My reputation was already destroyed when I became the angry billionaire everyone hated. If I'm going to rebuild it, I'd rather do it with you by my side. The town will never forgive you for choosing me. Then the town can stay bitter. I'd rather be happy with you than miserable with their approval. Norah looked around her apartment. At the life she'd built through sheer determination and endless work. It wasn't much, but it was hers. But it was also lonely, cold, empty. The Hayes estate was warm, full of life and laughter and purpose. And Thomas was offering her everything she'd lost when her parents died. Security, belonging, home. What about when Sophie doesn't need nursing anymore? Norah asked. What happens then? Then you'll still be my head architect. You'll still have a place in my home. That doesn't change. You're offering me charity. I'm offering you what you deserve. A career that uses your talents. A home that's actually livable. A family that cares about you. Thomas took her hands. You've given me so much, Norah. Let me give something back. Not out of obligation or pity, but because I want to. Because you've earned it. Norah wanted to say no. Pride demanded she say no. But she remembered what Thomas had told her weeks ago. About accepting help not making her weak. And she thought about Sophie, about working on real architecture again, about having a purpose beyond just surviving. Okay, she whispered. Thomas's face lit up. Okay. I'll accept your offer. All of it. Norah squeezed his hands. But I'm paying rent for the room. I won't be a charity case. You're not a charity case. You're an employee with housing benefits. Thomas. Fine. Nominal rent. $1 a month. 150, and that's my final offer. Norah couldn't help but smile. Deal. Good. Start packing. I'll help you move today. Today. Why wait? This place is depressing and Sophie misses you. So Norah packed. It didn't take long. She had so few possessions that everything fit in Thomas's SUV in one trip. Harold came out as they were loading the last box, his expression sour. Leaving, are you? He said. Yes, Harold. I'm giving 2 weeks' notice on the apartment. Moving up in the world, I see. Well, don't expect to come crawling back when it all falls apart. Thomas stepped forward, his voice cold. She won't need to come back. And if I ever hear you've spoken to her that way again, I'll buy this building and evict you. Are we clear? Harold paled and retreated inside without another word. Norah felt something fierce and protective bloom in her chest. No one had ever defended her like that before. The drive to the estate felt different this time. Not like a visit. Like going home. Thomas showed her to the guest wing, a beautiful suite with a bedroom, sitting room, and private bathroom that was bigger than her entire apartment had been. This is too much, Norah said. It's what you deserve. Thomas set down her boxes. Take your time settling in. When you're ready, Sophie's in the nursery. I think she's going to be very happy you're here. He left her alone to unpack. Norah sat on the bed, soft and clean and comfortable, and let herself cry. Not from sadness this time. From relief. From gratitude. From hope. She'd spent 9 years invisible, believing she'd lost her chance at a real life when her parents died. But maybe she'd been wrong. Maybe her real life was just beginning. 3 months passed in a blur of blueprints and baby giggles. Norah threw herself into the community center project with renewed energy. She redesigned the troubled sections, worked with contractors to implement her changes, and slowly won over the skeptical construction crew with her knowledge and skill. Thomas had been right. Her work spoke for itself. The council eventually approved the revised plans, though Patricia Morrison had voted against them with a speech about lowering professional standards. Norah had sat through it with her head high, refusing to let the woman's bitterness touch her. She had more important things to focus on. Like Sophie, who was growing fast. 4 months old now, sitting up on her own, laughing at everything. She'd started reaching for Norah the moment she entered her room, babbling sounds that sounded almost like words. She said "Mama" yesterday, Thomas told Norah one morning over breakfast. Clear as day. She was looking right at you. Norah's heart squeezed. I'm not her mama. You're the closest thing she has. Is it so terrible if she thinks of you that way? It wasn't terrible. That was the problem. Norah was getting attached. To Sophie, to this house, to the life she was building. To Thomas. That was the most dangerous attachment of all. Because somewhere between late-night design sessions and shared dinners and quiet moments watching Sophie sleep, Norah had fallen in love with Thomas Hayes. She hadn't meant to, had tried not to. But love didn't ask permission. And she was terrified. Because men like Thomas didn't fall for women like her. He was a billionaire. Educated. Sophisticated. From a family with old money and older traditions. Norah was nobody. The girl from the wrong side of town who'd never finished college and used to clean houses for money. They were employer and employee. Nothing more. Even if her heart wanted desperately for it to be something else. "Penny, for your thoughts," Thomas said, interrupting her spiral. They were in the study, reviewing final designs for the community center's grand opening next month. Sophie napped in a portable crib nearby, soft snores filling the comfortable silence. "Just tired," Norah lied. "I was up late working on the interior layout." "You worked too hard," says the man who was in his office at midnight last night. Thomas smiled. "Fair point. Maybe we both worked too hard. Someone has to finish this project. It's almost done. Thanks to you." Thomas set down his pen and looked at her. Really looked at her in that way that made Norah's breath catch. "Have I told you lately how grateful I am? For everything you've done?" "Only about 100 times. Not enough then. Norah, you've transformed this project. The contractors respect you. The designs are beautiful. And the council can't deny the quality of the work, no matter how much Patricia wants to. She'll find something to complain about. She always does. Let her. Her opinion doesn't matter." Thomas moved closer. "What matters is that you're happy. Are you? Happy here, I mean?" Norah's throat tightened. "Yes. Very much." "Good. Because I can't imagine this house without you anymore. You've become essential to everything here. To the work, to Sophie, to—" He trailed off, seeming uncertain. "To what?" Norah asked softly. Thomas opened his mouth to answer, but Sophie chose that moment to wake up crying. The moment broke. Norah went to soothe the baby, her mind racing. What had Thomas been about to say? The community center's grand opening was scheduled for Saturday, just before Thanksgiving. The entire town was invited. Local news would cover it. The mayor would give a speech. And Norah's name would be on the dedication plaque as lead architect. "Are you nervous?" Thomas asked the night before. They were doing a final walkthrough of the building, checking every detail. "Terrified," Norah admitted. "What if people hate it?" "They won't. Look at this place, Norah. It's perfect." She looked around the main hall. Large windows letting in natural light. Support columns that were both functional and beautiful. Spaces for community events, classes, gatherings. Everything Catherine had wanted in a community center, brought to life through Norah's designs. "I wish she could see it," Norah said. "She can. I believe that." Thomas touched the dedication plaque. Here, Catherine's name was listed first. Then Norah's. "She would be so proud of what you've created. We created it together. You and me." "Yes, we did." Thomas turned to her. "We make a good team." "We do." They stood close in the empty hall and Norah felt something shift. Some invisible barrier thinning between them. "Norah," Thomas said, his voice low. "There's something I need to tell you." "What?" But again they were interrupted. This time by the contractor calling with a last-minute question about the sound system installation. The moment passed. The grand opening was a massive success. 300 people attended. The mayor's speech praised both Catherine's vision and Norah's execution. Local business owners committed to using the center for events. The news coverage was glowing. And Patricia Morrison had to stand there and watch as the town celebrated a project she tried to derail. "This is your moment," Thomas whispered to Norah as people congratulated them. "Enjoy it." Norah tried to. But all she could think about was what Thomas had almost said the night before. What had he wanted to tell her? The answer came that evening, after all the guests had left and Sophie was asleep and they were alone in the study having a quiet celebratory drink. "I've been trying to tell you something for weeks," Thomas said. "But I keep losing my nerve." Norah's heart pounded. "Tell me now." "I'm in love with you." The words hung in the air between them. Norah froze. "What?" "I love you, Norah. I've been falling in love with you since the night you saved Sophie without asking for anything in return. Since you challenged me to be better, to do better. Since you brought light back into this house." Thomas set down his glass. "I know it's complicated. I know I'm your employer. I know the town already talks. But I can't keep pretending this is just professional gratitude. It's so much more than that. Norah couldn't breathe. Thomas, You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. If you don't feel the same way, that's okay. Nothing has to change. But if there's any part of you that... He stopped, waiting. I love you too, Norah whispered. Thomas's eyes widened. You do. I've been in love with you for months. But I didn't think someone like you could love someone like me. Someone like me? Yes. Successful, educated, from a good family. And I'm just brilliant and kind and strong and beautiful, Thomas interrupted. Norah, you're everything I never knew I needed. Everything Catherine would have wanted for Sophie and for me. Don't you see that? Norah wanted to believe him. Wanted to accept this happiness. But fear held her back. The town will crucify us. Let them. I don't care what they think anymore. What about Sophie? What if they say terrible things about me being her mother? Then we'll deal with it together. Norah, I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I'm just asking you to give us a chance. To see where this goes without fear holding us back. Norah looked at this man who'd shown her kindness when the world showed her cruelty. Who'd believed in her talents when no one else did. Who'd given her a home and a purpose and now his heart. Okay, she said. Let's give us a chance. Thomas smiled, that beautiful smile that transformed his whole face. Yeah. He kissed her then, gentle and sweet and full of promise. And for the first time in 9 years, Norah Williams believed in happy endings again. I want to pause here and ask you something important. Have you ever walked away from love because you didn't think you deserved it? Have you ever let fear steal your happiness? If Norah and Thomas's story is touching your heart, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments. What would you do in Norah's position? Would you risk everything for love or play it safe? Your thoughts matter to me, so please share them below. For 2 weeks, Norah floated in happiness. She and Thomas kept their relationship quiet, taking things slow. Dates that looked like work dinners. Holding hands when no one was watching. Stolen kisses in the study after Sophie went to bed. It felt like a secret. Their secret. And Norah treasured it. But secrets in small towns never stayed secret long. The first sign of trouble came at the grocery store. Norah was shopping for dinner ingredients, something she actually enjoyed now that she had a real kitchen to cook in, when she noticed 2 women from the ladies' auxiliary watching her. They whispered behind their hands, loud enough for Norah to hear. Living in his house now. Bold as brass. Catherine's barely cold in her grave. That baby is going to grow up so confused, poor thing. Norah gripped her shopping cart and walked away, refusing to engage. But at the checkout, the cashier, Betty, who'd always been friendly before, wouldn't meet Norah's eyes. That's $147, she said flatly. Betty, is everything okay? Norah asked. Just doing my job, ma'am. Ma'am. Like Norah was a stranger. Like 3 months of polite morning chats had never happened. Norah paid and left, feeling the weight of stares on her back. At home, she mentioned it to Thomas. They're just jealous, he said, pulling her close. Ignore them. But it wasn't just the grocery store. The whispers followed Norah everywhere. At the bank. At the post office. Even at the community center, where she'd gone to check on some final details. And the whispers turned into something worse. Anonymous letters started arriving at the estate. Typed notes with no signature, delivered to the mailbox overnight. She's using you for your money. That baby needs a real mother, not a gold digger. You're disrespecting Catherine's memory. Thomas burned them without reading past the first line. But Norah read them all, each word cutting deeper than the last. Then the town council called an emergency meeting. The topic: concerns about the Hayes Construction Company and its management. Thomas came home from that meeting with a face like thunder. They want to pull the contract for the new library project, he said. Patricia is leading the charge. She's convinced enough council members that my judgment is compromised. That I'm making poor business decisions because of my personal life. Because of me, Norah said quietly. Because they're vindictive people who can't stand seeing me happy. Thomas, this is your business. Your livelihood. It's fine. I have other contracts. The library project was just one job. But it wasn't fine. Over the next week, 2 more clients called to cancel projects. Both cited concerns about company stability. Both were friends with Patricia Morrison. Hayes Construction was being blacklisted because Thomas had fallen in love with the wrong woman. You have to end this, Norah said one night, after another cancellation call. For your company. For Sophie's future. I'm not ending anything. Thomas, please. I can't let you lose everything because of me. I'm not losing anything that matters. Business contracts come and go. But you, Sophie? This family we're building? That's irreplaceable. But. No buts. We weather this together or we don't weather it at all. I'm not letting them win, Norah. I'm not letting them take you from me. His words made Nora's heart swell even as fear tightened her chest. The situation got worse. Someone spray-painted "Homewrecker" on the community center's front door. The police investigated but found no evidence of who did it. Patricia Morrison's campaign against Norah became public. She gave an interview to the local paper about concerns for proper role models in positions of influence. And Harold, Norah's former landlord, suddenly filed a lawsuit claiming Norah owed him back rent and damages. It was baseless. Norah had receipts for every payment. But it was designed to harass, to make her look bad. Thomas hired lawyers to fight it. But the damage to Norah's reputation was done. I can't do this anymore, Norah said one night, packing a bag with shaking hands. I can't watch you lose everything because of me. I can't see Sophie grow up in a town that hates her because of who her father chose to love. What are you doing? Thomas stood in the doorway of her room, his face pale. I'm leaving. It's the only way to fix this. You're not leaving. I have to. For you. For Sophie. For your business and your future and everything the town is trying to destroy. Norah, stop. Thomas crossed the room and grabbed her hands. You're not leaving. I won't let you. You can't stop me. Watch me. They stood there, locked in a battle of wills, until Sophie's cry broke through from the nursery. Norah instinctively moved toward the door, but Thomas blocked her. She needs me, Norah said. We both need you. Don't you understand that? If you leave, you're not just leaving me. You're leaving Sophie. The baby who calls you Mama. The baby you've cared for since she was dying in my arms. Can you really walk away from her? Tears streamed down Norah's face. I don't want to. But I don't see another choice. Then I'll show you one. Thomas pulled out his phone and made a call. Patricia? It's Thomas Hayes. I need to speak with you and the full town council. Tomorrow morning. 10 a.m. at town hall. No, it's not negotiable. I'm making a public statement about the situation, and you're all going to hear it. See you there. He hung up and looked at Norah. Tomorrow this ends. One way or another. What are you going to do? I'm going to tell the whole town the truth. That I love you. That you're the best thing that's happened to my family since Catherine died. That anyone who has a problem with that can take their business elsewhere because I'm done letting bullies dictate my life. Thomas, you can't. It'll make everything worse. It can't get worse. And I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of letting them make you feel ashamed of being loved. Tomorrow we stop running. Tomorrow we fight back. Norah looked at this man, this beautiful, stubborn, loyal man who was willing to risk everything for her. Okay, she whispered. We fight back. Town hall was packed at 10 a.m. Word had spread fast about Thomas Hayes's planned statement. The entire town turned out to hear what the billionaire had to say. Norah sat in the front row, her hands clenched in her lap. Thomas had asked her to dress professionally, so she wore her blue blazer and tried to look confident even though her stomach churned with nerves. Mrs. Chin sat beside her, holding Sophie. The older woman had become a fierce ally over the past months, disgusted by the town's treatment of Norah. You hold your head high, Mrs. Chin whispered. You have nothing to be ashamed of. Norah tried to believe her. Mayor Henderson called the meeting to order. Patricia Morrison sat in the council seats, her expression smug. She thought she'd won. Thought Thomas was here to announce he was ending his relationship with Norah to save his business. She was wrong. Thomas stood at the podium, looking every inch the powerful businessman he was. Suit perfectly tailored. Posture confident. Voice strong. Thank you all for coming, he began. I've called this meeting to address the rumors and attacks that have been directed at my family over the past months. Specifically, attacks against Norah Williams. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Many of you remember when my wife, Catherine, died giving birth to our daughter. You remember my grief. My anger. The way I treated people in this town with cruelty and disrespect. I'm not proud of that behavior. I've spent the last months trying to make amends, trying to be better. Thomas paused, looking at Norah. 3 months ago my daughter was dying. Formula couldn't sustain her and I needed help. I went door to door begging for someone to nurse Sophie. Every single door closed in my face. Except one. He gestured to Norah. Norah Williams, who had every reason to refuse me, who I had treated with the same dismissiveness I showed everyone in this town, didn't hesitate to help. She saved my daughter's life. Not for money. Not for status. But because it was the right thing to do. The crowd was silent now. Over the months that followed, Norah became essential to my family. She nursed Sophie back to health. She fixed the structural problems in the community center that my highly paid engineering team couldn't solve. She brought light and warmth and kindness back into a house that had been dark with grief. Thomas's voice grew stronger. And somewhere along the way I fell in love with her. Deeply, completely, irrevocably in love. Not because she's convenient. Not because she's available. But because she's brilliant and compassionate and strong. Because she treats my daughter with the love Catherine would have wanted. Because she makes me want to be the man Catherine believed I could be. Patricia Morrison stood up. Mr. Hayes, this is highly irregular. Sit down, Patricia. I'm not finished. Thomas's voice was ice. Patricia sat, shocked into silence. I've listened to months of whispers and insults directed at Norah. I've watched this town, which prides itself on Christian charity and community values, treat her like garbage because she dared to help someone in need. Because she dared to be good at her job. Because she dared to be loved by me. He leaned forward on the podium. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to ask Norah Williams to marry me. Right here, right now, in front of all of you. And if she says yes, she will be my wife. The mother of my child. The co-owner of Hayes Construction. And anyone who has a problem with that can take their business and their judgment elsewhere, because I'm done caring what you think. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Thomas walked to Norah and knelt down in front of her. Norah's hands flew to her mouth. Thomas, what are you doing? Something I should have done weeks ago. He pulled out a small box and opened it, revealing a simple but beautiful diamond ring. Norah Williams, you saved my daughter's life. You saved mine too, though in a different way. You've shown me what strength really looks like. What kindness costs. What love means. I don't deserve you, but I'm asking anyway. Will you marry me? Norah looked at this man kneeling before her. At the entire town watching, waiting for her answer. She thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The loss. The loneliness. The slow rebuilding of hope. She thought about Sophie babbling mama in Mrs. Chen's arms. She thought about the life she could have with Thomas. Not perfect. Not easy. But real. Built on love and respect and mutual commitment. Yes, she said, her voice clear and strong. I'll marry you. The crowd gasped. Some people clapped. Others sat in stunned silence. Thomas slipped the ring onto Norah's finger and kissed her, right there in front of everyone. When they pulled apart, he stood and faced the town again. One more thing, he said. Hayes Construction is restructuring. Norah will be the head of our architectural division. We'll be expanding to take on projects outside of Millbrook. And we'll be very selective about which local contracts we accept going forward. If you've spent the last months attacking my fiancé, don't expect your business to be welcome. Patricia Morrison stood again, her face red. This is outrageous. You can't threaten the entire town. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm setting boundaries. Something I should have done months ago when you started your campaign of harassment against Norah. Thomas looked at her steadily. You turned this town against a woman who never did anything wrong. You tried to destroy her reputation, her livelihood, her happiness. And why? Because you wanted me for yourself? Because you couldn't stand seeing someone you considered beneath you succeed. How dare you? No, Patricia. How dare you? You and your little group of bullies have made Norah's life miserable for months. Well, it stops now. Because she's not going anywhere. She's going to be my wife. She's going to raise my daughter. And she's going to design beautiful buildings all over this state. With or without Millbrook's approval. Thomas took Norah's hand and pulled her to her feet. We're done here. Mayor Henderson, the community center is complete. The final inspection is scheduled for Friday. After that, I'm not sure when Hayes Construction will take on another Millbrook project. We have plenty of work elsewhere. They walked out of town hall together, Mrs. Chen following with Sophie. The crowd parted to let them through, whispers following in their wake. Outside, Thomas pulled Norah into his arms. Did I overstep? He asked. Asking you in front of everyone? I wanted them to see that I'm not ashamed of loving you. That I'm proud to call you mine. You didn't overstep, Norah said, tears streaming down her face. You were perfect. So you really will marry me? Yes. 1,000 times yes. Sophie reached for Norah from Mrs. Chen's arms, babbling happily. Norah took her, holding the baby close while Thomas wrapped his arms around them both. I love you, Thomas whispered. Both of you. My family. I love you too, Norah said. They stood there in the town square, a family united against the world's judgment. And for the first time since her parents died, Norah felt truly, completely home. 6 months later, The Hayes construction office building gleamed in the afternoon sun, its modern design a testament to Norah's architectural vision. Her name was on the door now, Norah Hayes, head of architectural design. Is her married name. The wedding had been small. Just them, Sophie, Mrs. Chen, and a handful of people who'd proven themselves true friends during the difficult months. No one from Patricia Morrison's crowd had been invited. Millbrook had largely turned its back on Hayes construction after Thomas's town hall declaration. But Thomas had been right. They had plenty of work elsewhere. Norah's designs had won awards. Other towns, cities even, were requesting her services. The company was thriving in ways it never had before. And Millbrook was starting to pay attention. Especially now that the community center had become the most used facility in 3 counties. Other towns sent representatives to study its design. Architecture magazines featured it in their pages. Patricia Morrison had been forced to admit, through gritted teeth at a council meeting, that perhaps the center was adequate. Thomas had laughed when he heard. Adequate. Norah, you revolutionized community architecture and she calls it adequate. I don't need her approval, Norah had said. And she'd meant it. She didn't need Millbrook's approval anymore. She had something better. Self-respect. A career she loved. A family that adored her. Now, sitting in her office, 7 months pregnant with their second child, Norah reviewed plans for a new library project in the next town over. The baby kicked, reminding her of his presence. Thomas appeared in her doorway holding Sophie's hand. At 18 months old, their daughter was walking and talking in full sentences. Mama, Sophie said, running to Norah. We brought lunch. We. Norah smiled at Thomas. Okay, I brought lunch. Sophie just provided supervision and moral support. He set down a bag from the diner. Your favorite? Turkey sandwich and vegetable soup. You're spoiling me. That's my job. Spoiling my pregnant wife is literally in the marriage vows. I'm pretty sure. Norah laughed. It is not. Should have been. Thomas kissed her forehead, then her lips. How's the library design coming? Good. I'm thinking large windows on the south side for reading areas. Natural light is important for reducing eye strain and creating inviting spaces. I know. I've heard this lecture before. Thomas grinned. You're brilliant, have I mentioned that? Not in the last hour. Tragic oversight. Norah Hayes, you are brilliant. Also beautiful. Also the best thing that ever happened to me. Sophie tugged on Thomas's pants. Daddy, you're being mushy again. I'm allowed to be mushy with Mama. But it's embarrassing. Thomas picked her up, spinning her around. Too bad. You're stuck with mushy parents. Sophie giggled, and the sound filled Norah's heart to bursting. This was what happiness looked like. Not perfect. Not without challenges. But real and solid in theirs. That evening they had dinner at the estate. Mrs. Chen had cooked, as she did most nights now, having transitioned from housekeeper to beloved family member who lived in the cottage on the property. Town council approved the new park project, Thomas said, passing Norah the salad bowl. They want Hayes Construction to bid on it. Patricia must be furious, Mrs. Chen said with satisfaction. After all her efforts to blacklist you. Patricia resigned from the council last month, Thomas said. Moved to Florida to be near her daughter. I heard she couldn't handle seeing how well we're doing. Good riddance, Mrs. Chen muttered. Now. We're being gracious winners, Thomas said, though he was smiling. After dinner, Thomas and Norah walked through the gardens, Sophie between them holding both their hands. Jump me, Sophie demanded. They lifted her up, swinging her forward. She squealed with delight. Again, she said immediately upon landing. One more than bath time, Norah said. They swung her again, her laughter echoing across the estate grounds. Later, after Sophie was tucked into bed and Mrs. Chen had retired to her cottage, Thomas and Norah sat in the study. The same room where Norah had first shown him her architectural designs. Where they'd fallen in love over blueprints and late-night conversations. I was thinking, Thomas said, pulling Norah close. Maybe we should expand the house. More bedrooms for when this little guy arrives. He patted her belly gently. And maybe more after him. More children? Why not? We're good at this family thing. Sophie's amazing. You're an incredible mother. I'd like a house full of kids if you're willing. Norah thought about it. A house full of children. Laughter and chaos and love filling every corner of this beautiful home. I'd like that, she said. A big family. The kind I always dreamed of. Then that's what we'll have. Thomas kissed her temple. Whatever you want, Norah. Whatever makes you happy. You make me happy. This life we're building. Our family. Our work. All of it. Even the parts where small-minded people tried to tear us apart? Even those parts. Because they made us stronger. Made us sure of what we wanted. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Do you ever regret it? Saying yes to me that day in town hall? Tying yourself to someone the town hated? Never. Not for a single second. Norah cupped his face. You showed me what it means to be loved completely. To be valued not for what I can do but for who I am. That's not something to regret. That's everything. I love you, Norah Hayes. I love you too, Thomas Hayes. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars through the study window. Outside, the community center's lights glowed in the distance. A symbol of what they'd built together. Not just a building but proof that kindness and hope and love really did lead. That two broken people could find wholeness in each other. That family wasn't just blood. It was choice and commitment and showing up every day with open hearts. 1 year later, Norah stood at a podium accepting a state architecture award for her library design. Thomas sat in the audience with Sophie and baby James, their son who had his father's eyes and his mother's smile. I want to thank my husband, Thomas, for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself, Norah said, her voice steady. And I want to thank everyone who said no when I needed help. Because that led me to the person who said yes. The person who changed my entire life with a single act of kindness. Never underestimate the power of helping someone when they're desperate. It might save more than their life. It might save their soul. The audience applauded. Thomas caught her eye and mouthed, I love you. Norah smiled. I love you too. After the ceremony, reporters wanted interviews. Other architects wanted to discuss collaborations. Offers poured in for new projects. But Norah had learned to balance ambition with what truly mattered. We're heading home, she told Thomas. Sophie has preschool in the morning and James needs his routine. Home sounds perfect, Thomas said. They drove back to Millbrook, which had slowly, grudgingly begun to accept Norah as one of their own. The community center won her some allies. The library project in the next town won her respect. And Sophie's sweet personality won over even the hardest hearts. It turned out, people found it difficult to hate the family that had brought jobs, beautiful buildings and economic growth to the region. The Hayes estate gates opened at their approach. Oh, their sanctuary. Their safe place. Mrs. Chin waited at the door. Dinner's ready. And congratulations on the award, Norah. Well deserved. Thank you, Mrs. Chin. They gathered around the table, this family they'd built from grief and hope and stubborn love. Sophie told them about her day at preschool. James babbled happily in his high chair. Mrs. Chin shared town gossip. And Thomas held Norah's hand under the table, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. This was everything Norah had thought she'd lost when her parents died. Purpose. Belonging. Love. And she'd found it in the most unexpected place. In the arms of a desperate man holding a dying baby on a rainy November night. Sometimes kindness changed the world. Sometimes it just changed two lives. But those two lives could rebuild everything. Could create beauty from ashes. Could prove that love really did overcome all obstacles. What are you thinking about? Thomas asked, noticing her quiet reflection. How grateful I am, Norah said simply. For all of this. For you. For our family. For the journey that brought us here. Even the hard parts? Especially the hard parts. They taught us what matters. Thomas raised his water glass. To the hard parts. And to the woman strong enough to survive them and wise enough to choose love anyway. To family, Mrs. Chin added. To Mama, Sophie said, mimicking the adults. They clinked glasses, this family bound not by blood but by choice and commitment and endless, stubborn hope. And in that moment, Norah Hayes knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Home.